Welcome to Bookies, and thanks for clicking on the thumbnail and watching this video. You've reached the only YouTube channel that, when monetized, will give 100% of the proceeds to local libraries and literacy programs. So if that sounds like a great idea to you, please subscribe, and I'll try to get you some decent book reviews on some great books. Today we're going to talk about The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And let's just start off with these beginning lines from the novel. No live organism can continue for long to exist safely under conditions of absolute reality. Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. The Haunting of Hill House is what I'm going to describe as atmospheric horror. I don't know if Jackson created the whole plot device of the haunted house, but regardless of whether she created it back in 1959 when this novel was first published, it doesn't really matter because she nails the genre right here in The Haunting of Hill House. Without spoiling any of the plot, I'll tell you that, this will be a surprise to you, Hill House is haunted. And the people in the neighboring town know that it's haunted. And so if you are a stranger and you go into that town and you ask about Hill House, they won't even talk to you about it. And if they do, they'll try to dissuade you from going there because it's notoriously haunted. And it's for this very reason that Dr. John Montague wants to study the house. So he rents it out for 3 months with the idea of conducting certain experiments and trying to find some rationale behind the psychic disturbances. The one thing that needs to be clear in this review is the house is haunted. That is not at question at all in this particular novel. So Montague really needs some assistance, right? And so he decides that he's going to issue some invitations. Well, you would think that he would go and find himself some qualified, quote unquote, ghost hunters, but that's not actually what he does. No, instead he invites 2 totally unqualified people to accompany him at Hill House. The first is 32-year-old Eleanor Vance, and here's her qualifications. When she was 12 years old, there was some kind of psychic disturbance in her house where stones were rolling down the ceiling. And it's because of this observation by her that makes her qualified. Okay, fair enough. Jackson can have it the way she wants it. The other person invited is Theodora, or Theo, and her qualification is that sometime prior in her life, she was able to guess the identity of certain playing cards with kind of a remarkable success rate. That's it. That's it. But unless you're feeling cheated because Dr. Montague has not brought anybody qualified with him, fear not, fear not. The owner of the house is going to require that one of the family members accompany this motley crew of psychic investigators. So the owner of the house sends the heir to the house, Luke Sanderson, who's essentially a ne'er-do-well dandy, at least according to his aunt. And actually, Luke's not really a ne'er-do-well, and he kind of is a dandy, but that's okay. He's not a bad guy at all. Eleanor is the first to arrive, and everything in her body and soul when she first views the house tells her to run. The description is this: Hill House is vile. It is diseased. Get away from here at once. That's the internal dialogue in Eleanor's mind when she first views the face of Hill House. And, you know, everybody should listen to your heart, right? You think she does? No, she doesn't. She's going in the house despite her trepidation and fear. In any event, what we find out is that essentially Luke, Theo, and Eleanor are really not involved in any kind of investigation. I mean, the only task Dr. Montague gives them is to take notes of everything they observe. So essentially, it starts with the 4 of them just kind of waiting around for something to happen. And that's about as far as I'm going to go with the plot, because I don't want to get into the exact description of what happens, because it would kind of ruin the novel for you. So I'm really going to talk about some key highlights that I noticed when I read this novel. Earlier, I described this novel as an atmospheric horror. And what I mean by that is Jackson writes so well that the reader is pulled into the house as if you're there with the other characters. And so, dear reader, what do you find when you get pulled into this narrative? You find that the house is a place of despair and that it seems to be awake and watching. The house is arrogant. It's haunting. It's not a place to live. It's not a place for people, for love, or for hope. It's a place where the caretakers won't even be present after dark. It's a place where they warn you that if you scream at night, nobody will hear you. And bad things happen to people that try to leave at night. That's Hill House. That's the atmosphere that the novel creates. And really the best description is one I already mentioned. It's despair, this feeling of loss and no escape. I think if you were to try to analyze this novel as a character study, you'd really have to start with the character of the house. Jackson almost personifies this house. It's the house itself that's the evil entity. But I don't really analyze this as a character study. I think it's more of, it kind of stays in its lane as a horror. This novel does not get fancy. You're getting a haunted house story. That's what you're getting with this novel. Pure and simple, nothing fancy, no underlying themes, no societal commentary, none of that. It's just good horror, incredibly well written. But I want to get back to the house. The interesting thing here is how the house plays on some of the characters, in particular Eleanor. Now, Eleanor is a sheltered and rather insecure young woman who's never really been away from home. And in her insecurity, the house plays on that. It evokes gloom and creates a sense of paranoia in Eleanor. In fact, every conclusion that Eleanor makes in her mind is colored by the evil of the house and whatever that is in it. And being inside Eleanor's head makes you feel nervous for the other characters. And like I said, she's not right. She's not in her right mind at all. And the interesting thing is, as a contrast to the gloom and the despair in the house and the increasing paranoia that Eleanor is feeling, there you have Luke and Theo that are just kind of taking this on as a life experience. Yeah, they know the house is haunted. They can observe some of the poltergeist manifestation type activity in there, the banging, the children crying, and there are no children, all that. But they have a very light outlook. And so this witty repartee between the two and this casual disregard for what would be truly frightening kind of increases the gloom and the horror as it relates to Eleanor. The two things play off one another quite nicely. And so, like I said, the other characters don't seem to be impacted by the haunting like Eleanor is. Dr. Montague, basically he just goes into scientist mode. He wants to start doing controls. Everybody take careful notes. Everybody stay together so nobody's isolated. Open up every door and prop it open so you can navigate the labyrinth that is Hill House. By the way, that doesn't work. The house keeps shutting the doors. So stay calm and use distraction when things start getting a little too heavy. That's Dr. Montague. That's how he deals with the stress. But I think this nonchalance that Dr. Montague and Theo and Luke all seem to have with regard to the haunting activity in the house is really an affront. The house has enchained and destroyed the lives of everyone that's ever lived in it. And here they are just casually spending a weekend. I don't think the house likes that at all. And as for the poltergeist activity itself, it certainly does exist. Not everything is in the minds of the occupants of the house. Jackson creates this tension and she puts in some scares for the actual haunting. There's banging on doors. There's something trying a doorknob to get into the room. The weeping and babbling of a child that is not in the house. You get the sense that the house is manipulating the occupants. And however, the true horror in this novel is how the house plays on the interior thoughts of the occupants. It's not necessarily the poltergeist activity. That's where the novel shines. You couldn't really address how the house starts impacting the psyche of Eleanor in a movie. You couldn't really understand how Eleanor's internal dialogue becomes negative and malignant towards the others because it's internal. But we're lucky, we're readers, so we get to interact with this. We get to kind of fill in the spaces with our minds. We are privy to all this material that if it was just on a screen, really you just have to portray the bumps and bangs of the poltergeist activity. This is much more convincing. The novel is much more convincing. By means of a narrative, Jackson can whisper that fear and foreboding to you as your mind paints the pictures of what's going on in the house. And so you can experience it for yourself. That's the beauty of the novel. And coming back to the house itself, at what point does the house act on you? And at what point does it possess you? And there's a fine line between the two. And Jackson really plays on that with regard to Eleanor. It's this tugging of a line back and forth. Is the house haunting Eleanor, or has Eleanor become the house? Masterfully played by Jackson. And as for the ending, I would say that it comes rather abruptly. It just kind of rushes up on you and something's going to happen, and it happens, and you're just going to have to sit there and think about it. Do I like that conclusion? What does it mean? And I kind of like that. I thought that was a good way to bring resolution to what really is a fairly short novel. For a great read that I think will capture your attention and as close as the real thing perhaps, give you the experience of being in a truly malignant haunted house, read this novel. I'm giving it 4.25 stars out of 5. Right about now, there's going to be a little circular picture there with the naval officer. That used to be me. And I do believe that if you click on that, you'll subscribe to the channel. And we'll get this darn thing monetized and start sending money to public libraries. I can't wait for that day. So with that, have a great day. God bless.